Good morning.
Good morning.
We're delighted you chose this session. I'm the warm-up act to Heather. How many folks do we have here who work at the district level? By golly, a whole covey of you, huh? And part of your role is finding qualified career and technical teachers. And how many we have who work as school leaders and teacher educators? Okay, who did I miss? Others, I guess, who don't fall in those categories. Well, we noticed over the years with the high schools at work effort, we survey every other year somewhere between 12 and 15,000 career and technical teachers across the country who are in a network of some 1,100 high schools. And we also survey academic teachers. And we noticed throughout the year that teachers who took an alternative route had certain needs that were not being expressed by 15-year veterans who also held a college degree and had been prepared through a teacher preparation programs. And these centered around planning, cooperative learning, project-based learning, cooperative learning, classroom management, and classroom assessment. But those who came through an alternative route, whether they had a degree but no pedagogy, or did not have a degree, they had some major needs. There are big gaps in how the two groups filled out the survey. So this went on for several years, and the percent of teachers who were coming through the alternative route kept growing. Today it's about 75%. And so we finally met with state leaders a few years ago, and they said, look, this is a problem we ought to try to address. And so we finally found an opportunity to work with the National Center to address that problem. We need to design an accelerated, fast-track system that within 14 months, we can give 200 hours of instruction to alternative certified CTE teachers built kindly on the Teach for America model, that their heads are going to hurt, they're going to be stretched out, they're going to have productive struggle, so that they'll be among the best teachers in the building. We need to figure out how to do that. And so that's what we set out to do. And he has been gracious enough to let us to develop this, and now if we can find the money, we'll even field test it and see that, make sure that it works real well in terms of improved student achievement. If we don't find the money, we're going to move it out there anyway because we think we got some good stuff. Now, why this project? Well, it's hard to find highly qualified CTE teachers in certain fields who will work for the wages we have. And even with those little bonuses we have. And then you get them in there, and they get a whole diversified group of students, and guess what? You spent $10,000 recruiting them, and what happens? They're gone in 6 months because they do not know how to manage the diversity of students in the classroom. You've got, so you have high teacher attrition among this group. You have some unique needs of beginning CTE teachers, and that they do have a different skill sets, and that you have to be an effective teacher. And there are certain gaps that they have in that regard. While they bring a body of expertise with them, how you organize that expertise into a curriculum and a set of learning experiences is a very big challenge. We discovered that for every state, there's a different route for alternative certified teachers. And we literally found folks who were alternative certified teachers who could go as long as 5 years and get no formal preparation on planning, on how you do good project-based learning, how you manage a classroom, how you do effective assessment. And there's a growing percent in our network of schools today is about 75% of the new CTE teachers are coming through an alternative route. They've had no formal teacher preparation in the process. And taking a course in history and philosophy and the traditional courses simply were not getting that done for us. They have increased responsibilities. In the old days, well, CTE teacher's job was preparing people for a career. 70 to 80% of the CTE students in our network of schools, we think they're fairly represented across the country, plan to go on for further study, and 1 year later they have enrolled. So you literally have a dual mission. preparing both for work and for continued learning in a field. So it's a double mission, and that's not well understood, and you have to address that differently. It does place different burdens on the teacher. And we believe, and one reason we got into this, that CTE has a role to play in broader high school reform. Now, you wouldn't know that today because often we're trying to fix high schools by focusing on two groups of teachers, and the CTE teachers sit on the sideline. I do not believe America will regain its educational preeminence in the world until they begin to figure out, by joining rigorous academics with intellectually demanding CTE, will we in fact graduate 90% of the students and graduate 80% of the students ready for some form of further study or some type of employer certification. So we have a real role to play, and one ought to be able to be a key partner with other faculty members in expressing the potentiality that we bring to the table. We have a very diverse student. The students are becoming more diverse. We are not too far away from the nation as there'll be no majority population. Increase, in fact, the number of states that exist today. There's an increasing diverse student population from different cultures and socioeconomic backgrounds, and it makes it more difficult to manage those classrooms. We've not paid enough attention to what intellectually demanding CTE looks like. You can have drill sheet CTE, you can have low-level CTE, or you can have productive struggle CTE. Just because it's hands-on does not mean it's rigorous. You can have hands-on dummy math and you can have hands-on dummy CTE. We have not thought enough about what makes intellectually demanding CTE courses, and we wanted these folks to experience what intellectually demanding assignments look like for themselves so that they can begin to mimic that with their students. Right, Heather?
Right. We did have a couple of meltdowns.
We had a couple of meltdowns, but they now have seen the light. We are masters at project-based learning, but not Dewey's approach to project-based learning. The Europeans do it right. We do projects, we do hands-on projects, and we grade kids on the quality of the product. Good project-based learning is a vehicle for learning technical content, for developing cognitive skills, for deepening your understanding of math and science. But that's not the way we design our project-based learning. And if we're going to make a maximum contribution, we have to rethink that whole. You go to most European countries, they understand that. Their CT folks have implemented Dewey. We just know about that old bearded fellow. Everybody's aligned their CTE courses to academics, but that doesn't mean two hoots in hell. It's about embedding them in there and having lesson plans to teach them and working with the academic teachers in collaboration. That's the value of CTE. The workplace demands it. If I had time, I'd give you the changing nature of work. I'll give you one fact. Did you know that many employers have given up on the American male? They are not acquiring the skill sets, either in CTE courses and other areas that the workplace now demands. Only 81% between 25 and 55 are in the workplace, compared to 95% in 1969. 50% of the ladies are in the workplace in 69, almost 70% in the workplace today. An article in Bloomsburg Business pointed out that young ladies have a better skill set for the workplace today than young men. So we have to rethink through it. In many ways, the American high school has been designed more for young ladies in recent years than men. So this is part of what this is all about. So I'm going to turn it over to Heather. She's going to give you the real Scooby-Doo.
We partnered with the National Research Center for Career and Technical Education. We're the Southern Regional Education Board. We didn't really say that. He's the senior vice president sitting over there, and I'm the director of this project. So this is an induction model that, as Dr. Bottom said, is fast track. It's just a little over, well, it can be 12 months. Kind of depends on when you schedule your summer institutes, but it takes about a year. And we're looking at improving three things with this model. Teacher competence, which means how well they do their job in the classroom. Teacher self-efficacy, which deals with how their sense of making a difference in their students' lives. It's not quite the same as confidence. It's like you know that what you know can make a difference for your students, and you know how to use that knowledge. So self-efficacy is a very important teacher trait, and teachers who have high self-efficacy can improve their students' achievement and their motivation to learn. So there's a pretty clear line of research that goes along with that. And then the third thing that we were really willing to look at with this model was, can we improve the teachers, beginning teachers' commitment to the field? Now, first we wanted to look at retention, and our evaluation panel said retention is a tricky thing with teachers, because to stay in the field also means that you assume they're going to have a job. And some of them leave because something happened with the job. And so it wasn't their own commitment to stay in the field, it was some economic condition or something that changed. So if you look at career commitment, that's a person's interest in staying in the field, their commitment to stay in it, even to find another job when one is not there. Okay. And ultimately, because it is a research project, and you have two summaries. One is our research summary that talks about our methodology. That's our little one-pager. And then the longer one talks a little bit more about the background and things like that. And you're welcome to email me. My email address is up here on the chart. If you want a full set of references, we've got some pretty deep work that we've done in this in terms of literature reviews and things like that. I'd be happy to share those with you. And so ultimately, we want to prepare this intervention for experimental trials, which means we now would like to, at the end of July, be able to set up control groups in different states and actually look at this. What we were doing with this study was called an iterative development methodology, and that's the Institute of Education Sciences Goal 2 research, which gives you a series of field tests and analyzing data and then making revisions, and another field test and analyzing data and making revisions until you get a product, or in this case an intervention, that's ready for experimental trials. Because experimental trials are very expensive, and this is a complicated intervention, okay? So here's our theory of change. When you're doing an IES Goal 2 study, you develop a theory of change. It's really not all that complicated. We believe professional development and high-quality school support, those two factors together. When we began to look at the literature, we could find high-quality college-based, university-based programs. But they weren't talking to what was happening locally. Like, they didn't talk to the local mentor who was hired and selected by the local school district, in some cases paid through a completely different funding stream. And so what was happening with the mentor might have been something completely different. The mentor could have been delivering a different message here than what they might be getting at the university. The assignments that they were doing at the university weren't relevant to what was required to the district in that moment in time. And also that goes with administrator support. Or maybe perhaps the university person wasn't actually visiting them in the field to actually meet the mentor and meet the administrator. So they could be talking back and forth. What does this teacher need? What support do they need to stay in the classroom? So we're looking at both of those things together. We're also looking at the quality of those things, because I don't know if you follow it, but there's been a major study of teacher induction and mentorship that's been going on just generally in education. Their findings right now are that mentors do not make a difference. Now, that is a statistical, what we call a statistically rigorous study. So it has matched groups, control groups, it has a very large number of teachers. But there's a lot of things that are different about that study, because it involves some people who are traditionally prepared and some people who are alternative certified. It involves largely elementary teachers. The majority of those teachers in that study have had student teaching and university preparation before they had their first job. So there's a lot of things that are different in CTE that we believe makes the mentorship still important for us. So we're still out there with it. Okay. And looking really at that, the whole notion that it's about the quality of the professional development you deliver. Another big thing we saw in the field was university programs package their courses because of NCATE and those kind of things around themes or specific outcome. So you take a course in classroom management, you take a course in classroom assessment, you take a course in research-based methods, you take a course in instructional planning. What we found is that teachers need those subjects in an integrated way when you are alternatively certified. You cannot wait for year 2 to have classroom management, and you cannot wait for year 2 to have classroom assessment. You're going to need to do those things right out. So our model takes those subjects and integrates them into a just-in-time fashion. We have lessons on all those different topics, just like you would see at a university-based program, but our lessons are sequenced in such a way so that when you finish your 2-week boot camp, you come out with your first day lesson plan. You know how you're going to introduce yourself to your students. You know how you're going to find out about your students. You have your first project planned. You have your first rubric that you're going to use already and shiny and ready to go. You are ready for the first 9 weeks of school, and then you're ready for another meeting with us. And then we're ready to look at your first 9 weeks project and how did that go. So now let's plan the next 9 weeks. And so it's much more integrated to be a professional development model that's not based solely around the notion of university-based courses and CATE approved. Okay, not quite the same. So here's the components of our program, and I've been hinting at them. We looked a lot at different programs, and we believe really strongly. We know a lot of people who do 5 days before the first year of teaching, but we really felt like 2 weeks was important, and we put the 2 weeks consecutively because, of course, of the time crunch. This is a very rigorous piece. We did 8.
College days.
They're not. And so another thing we found was that a lot of the college programs that we looked at, or even the ones that were run by state departments of education, were very oriented toward listening to a speaker. And they were getting a lot of information. They had this big notebook, and they got all this. They still get a notebook in ours, too. But, you know, you got to have a notebook. You're not professionally developed. So anyway, you go and you get all this stuff, and you listen, and you're expected on your own time then to put together your plans. So that doesn't happen. In this workshop, you come out with plans. So the morning, and we have a sequence of delivery that's very important to the model. In the morning, it's very workshop-oriented, and we deliver lessons in a way that you would expect teachers to teach. So we don't talk to them any more than 20 or 30 minutes at a time, and then they're doing some kind of an activity. So, and when we teach them about what high-quality CTE is, they may be doing a literacy activity at the same time. So we debrief our lessons on 2 levels. One is the content of what we just taught you, and the other is the activity that we used to teach it with. And how would you use that in your own classroom? So by the time we get to talk about literacy and embedding literacy, they've already learned 5 or 6 literacy strategies, experienced them. So workshop in the morning. Early afternoon is them working either in small groups or individually on some kind of planning or the task that we talked about in the morning. And then late afternoon is a teach back. Every day, they come back at the end of the day, and they get up in front of their peers and do some kind of little teaching activity. Even on the very first day of the 2 weeks, they prepare their 5-minute introduction of themselves that they're going to make to their students on the first day. And for many of them, when they got up to do that little 5-minute introduction, it was the first time they had ever stood in front of a group of people and said anything about themselves like that, even though they had run their own business for 25 years, right? And they were terrified. And it's harder to do in front of your peers, actually. But they came back and told us at the first October session after that, I felt really good the first day. I was relaxed. You know, I had a few little nerves, but I knew what I was going to do. And so it was very important that they come out with those kinds of very practical things. So after the 2-week boot camp, we do 3 2-day follow-up sessions. And ideally, these would be at the end of like the first marking period, like 9 weeks or so in. So October, January, March. And in between each of those, the instructor makes a visit. So the instructor who's teaching goes out, meets the mentor, meets the administrator, and then observes the teacher. And then you have the next session, and that informs me as the instructor about what we're going to talk about to a certain degree, or the way that we're going to talk about it, because I'm going to be asking them to bring work back. So they'll have to have brought back their first project with the student work that went with it. How did the students do? How are we going to plan our project differently for the second 9 weeks based on what we learned? So we do the same thing in January, and then we do the same thing in March, and then we come back for a second 10-day summer institute. Now, the cool thing about that is it puts them into year 2. Even though this is just a 1-year project, they'll leave that second 10-day summer institute with their whole second year planned. And so they're really together. So on-site coaching visits through the support, we have them in this induction model. We also have a training for the local mentor and administrator. So during the 2-week Summer Institute, we have them come in to where we're offering the Summer Institute, and they get a 2-day training on the materials that we're using with the teacher. The mentor gets all the materials that we give to the beginning teacher. So they have this, they see the same forms, the same plans, and we also teach them all how to use an observation instrument that we developed for the project using the Danielson framework. And we worked with the Danielson framework to develop it. It's a 1-page CTE observation form. Some administrators who went through our program said that was the best thing they got out of it, one of the great things, because they now are using it with all their teachers. So we have a really good training that is 2 days in length on that. And that's part of the package of this whole piece. It was a big thing we found, that there was that disconnect between what was happening at the university or the state level and what was happening with the local mentor. So for them to use the same language is a big part of the quality of the local support that's needed. And also knowing the person who's doing that teacher education is really key. We also linked these teachers, because we worked in states where they were geographically far apart. We linked these teachers through a monthly webinar. And every month we'd come together, and I know different states do this different way. We had one state said they did something, I don't know if it was your state, Chip, if you and I were talking or who it was, but one state said they do like a Tuesday tool talk, and they have an online, and they give the students the cameras, not the students, the beginning teachers the cameras, and they can come on and talk to each other. And we did require the mentors to do that with them. So we've set it at the end of the school day. The mentors and the beginning teacher would come on together, and we would have an agenda for each webinar. We have suggested agendas in here, and we have sample webinars for you to look at as part of the package too. And then they come on, and we would have a time where the mentors would share. We'd have a time where the beginning teachers would share, and then we'd introduce or work through either a new lesson or we would go back to one we had done before to kind of reflect. So we did a lot of work before we even got this rolling to look at what tasks we should put in here. And we gave a lot of thought to it. I mean, there were some things that didn't make the cut for the first 2 weeks. And I was reminded because a gentleman came up to me at the end of yesterday afternoon, we did a session on some of the big skills that we teach that it could also be very valuable for for veteran teachers. And he said, you know, I don't see anything here on writing educational objectives. And I said, you know what, after all of our expert panels and after 2 years of field testing, we did not do that until the second Summer Institute. We did look at the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, so we kind of looked at the opposite ends of, you know, like what experienced teachers need to do, what beginning teachers need to do. In-task is, you might say, well, that was 1992, but in-task actually drove a lot of the professional teaching standards that are in your states right now. And there's not a lot of change that's happened in that. So that was a pretty good piece to look at, actually. And then the Danielson framework, of course, was what drove praxis. And so it's a really thorough piece, and in fact, in Ohio, a lot of their standards are actually developed off of that. Now, here's what we came up with. 4 big modules. Now, remember, these aren't taught in linear fashion. They're integrated throughout. But we came up with instructional planning, instructional strategies, classroom assessment, and classroom management. Now, if you flip, I think it's like page 8 of your handout, the big one. You're going to see a page for each of these. And I can highlight for you a few things that are really big in our instructional planning. Now, what you see in this little chart, each of these little chart pieces is a lesson, all right? And when I say a lesson, that means as an instructor, there's an instructor guide and there's a participant's guide. So the instructor guide is for me, the teacher. The participant's guide is for people. That's all published materials. It's about 250 pages of instructor guide for each of these modules, okay? So essentially what it does is it lays out for the instructor, minute by minute, what you do. So it's laid out in like a workshop format. I don't know if you've ever been familiar with any of our other materials at SREB, like our leadership modules, anything like that. We have a lot of materials that are planned for instructors to use in professional development workshops, and they're laid out very similarly. You have a PowerPoint that you can use, slides you can draw from, but you will sequence these lessons according to our suggested sequence. So even though you see them in a piece here, and there's kind of a logic to how they're laid out, You will not necessarily teach these as they're laid out. You'll come back to some will take you more than one time to teach. Some are actually, we've delivered through the mentor. We did the one on organizing the classroom space. We basically taught the mentors how to do that, and they just do it on site with them. We don't do it during the 2 weeks or any of our workshops, but it's an important thing for them to know. There's one on under classroom management about building wide rules and procedures. We handed that lesson to the administrators. We said, and in fact, we gave them time to do it because part of the mentor administrator training is kind of a social time at the end of the day, and we have them get together and talk about, so we had them get together and talk about that lesson. So we have also sequenced through these materials in the participants guide, we have suggested activities for the beginning teacher to do with their mentor and suggested activities for them to do with their administrator. So we give them little assignments and we say, okay, we just talked about, lesson planning. So we want you to go to your mentor and we want to ask what are the top 3 resources they use in their lesson planning, and have them show you these resources, have them show you what their lesson plans look like, and compare it to what we taught you in this workshop. And then when you come back, we want to talk about what you found. So they're specific, and when the administrators and mentors come in with the training, we show them how to do, we say, here's the things you should look forward to your beginning teacher coming to you about. So there's a real interdependence that we've built. So you'll see pretty interesting things. Instructional planning, I went over a little bit about it yesterday, but one of the big pieces in instructional planning, we teach 4 types of instructional plans: course syllabi, curriculum maps, unit plans, and lesson plans. We spend a lot of time with unit plans because unit plans become our vehicle to plan project-based units, to embed literacy and numeracy, to embed cooperative learning, to embed higher order thinking, and to really help them see the big 3 content areas we teach them, which are the technical pieces, which are related to the career, the academic pieces, and the 21st century skills. And we expect all 3 of those things to show up in every type of instructional plan. So when they do a curriculum map, there's a column for each of those. When they do a course syllabus, all 3 are expected to be explained to students and parents. When they do a unit plan, they consider all 3. When they do a lesson plan, they consider all 3. So the unit plan is a really important piece for us. We really help them work it through. In instructional strategies, there are 2 really big ones that are essentially our expert panels. We had expert panels. We did essentially a concept paper and reviewed all the literature around each of these, and that took us almost a year. We worked with expert panels from across the country, and some amazing people. My favorite expert panel was Instructional Strategies because we had John Mergendaler from the Buck Institute in California and Roger Johnson, who's been one of my revered in cooperative learning. And to hear them talk and say, these are the 2 most important things you could teach your teachers: project-based learning, not projects, project-based learning and cooperative learning. And they talked about John Mergendaler talked about how project-based learning is an envelope. And I thought that everything that you use in teaching can go into. And I just thought what he said was elegant. And it was great to be working with some of these great thinkers of our time in education, and I just thought it was fascinating. We worked a lot on those 2 strategies, and even though there's it looks kind of a short piece on problem solving, but problem solving is really integrated in all 4 modules. Because when we do classroom assessment, we're talking about performance-based assessment, and how you put that together. Even when we're talking about classroom management, we're talking about building a classroom environment where you're going to cultivate students working together on a project. So these are really big pieces for us. In classroom assessment, I talked about it yesterday, but the big thing for us is that we teach them how to use formative assessment really well as summative. We don't teach them how to write rubrics, no time. We teach them how to select them and how to shape them up when they're not too great. We don't teach them how to write a test. We teach them how to select great test items because a lot of them have test banks to choose from. We do teach them, however, to look at a unit of study and develop a comprehensive set of assessments. So they have formatives that help students move toward excellent performance on the summative in that unit. So They have to have predictive value. So if you're going to have a test here at the end, you've got to have some quizzes to show them what your test items are going to look like and to prepare them and give them great feedback. And we know that the formative assessment really improves not only the student's final performance on the summative assessment, but it also improves student motivation. And it builds your relationship with students because you're giving them rich feedback about their progress toward the learning targets. So that's a big thing for classroom assessment. In classroom management, biggest thing for us there was the pyramid. Anybody seen the pyramid? Response to intervention pyramid. Are you familiar with it? So we teach them the base of the pyramid, which is what they do for all their students. Personalization, it's prompts, invitations, it's having a really great relationship with your students and knowing them well so that your students will want to work hard for you. So that's first level. Second level, second tier of response to intervention, we teach them things that they're going to use when students' misbehavior or their academic performance is chronically not where you want it. So the big skill that we teach there is how to hold a one-on-one conference with a student and write a contract for improvement. So we teach them how to make parent phone calls, let them know the conference is happening. We teach them how to sit down one-on-one. We make them role play it. That's one of the teach backs. So you have to sit down, and it was powerful watching these teachers only 9 days into our program sit down and role play students and teacher in a one-to-one conference over a sticky issue. It was powerful. We had a couple meltdowns there too. Meltdowns are not a bad thing. I mean, it's a little scary when you're an instructor, but it was really powerful, the kind of transformational learning that was happening with our beginning teachers. So that was a big thing for the pyramid. And then, of course, the very top of the pyramid is when things are egregious, and that's when you really involve the office. But see, a lot of our teachers, even veteran teachers, go from the base of their pyramid to the top of their pyramid. And then they're, so they don't have a good, and they have to, even if they send a student out, this is what we tell our beginning teachers, even if you send a student out of the room and an administrator deals with the problem, when that student re-enters, you still have the problem. So you have to sit down with that student and reestablish that relationship. You have to recognize, and the student needs a chance to apologize. You need to, say, this is what I want the desired behavior to be. So that's what the one-to-one conference is all about. Okay, so we really teach that. And we talk about, obviously, undergirding the whole thing is the teacher reflection. So I think I've pretty much hit. We have guides for instructors and participants. We recommend a sequence of delivery, and I've talked a little bit about our delivery methods, too. Support element-wise, we basically, with the mentoring and administrator training, what we do is put them together for parts of the training and then pull them apart for the other parts of the training. So we'll have the mentor administrators start out together, learn about the project, learn about the materials, and then we'll take the mentors aside. They'll work on their mentoring skills, and the administrators, and we'll work on those observation, especially the use of the observation tool to give good feedback. How to do a walkthrough, how to do a pre and post conference with them, and that kind of thing. So we provide a schedule, a monthly schedule of this is what the mentor will do in August, September, October, November. And this is what the administrator will do in August, September, October, November for the beginning teacher. And then as the instructor, I send out monthly emails to remind them about each of those things. And then we talk, if I don't see the evidence, then we talk about it when I'm on site. So that's three visits, all right? So let's talk a little bit about our findings. We have these 7 essential skills, and I talked about them yesterday, that I think really are huge. And even though there's just 4 modules, these things are big. The planning standards-based instruction, and mainly, I think if you really focus in on the unit plan at the beginning, it's real helpful. And our unit planning form, which I distributed yesterday, if you were in the session yesterday afternoon. And by the way, if you want those handouts, say that when you email me, say you want the 7 essential skills handouts, and I'll give them to you from yesterday, along with the PowerPoint. Because I gave examples in the handouts, actually from the materials for each of these, and there is a unit planning form in there. And when we give the beginning teachers a unit plan form like that, we also give them a unit plan rubric. So they know what the quality is that we're looking for. We give them examples. We're getting a pretty deep set of examples from a variety of content areas. One of the really cool things about our field tests were that we really we had a broad spectrum, and this is one of the challenges. I'm surprised nobody said it. Maybe if you're a university person, you see it a little bit more. When you have an alternative certification program, you can have a person with a PhD sitting beside someone who has just a high school diploma. And so that's a huge challenge. The cool thing was that in our field test, we got the whole gamut. We actually, I had, in our first cohort, I had a dentist sitting beside, a person who was just off the pipeline in Oklahoma. I'm going to teach welding. So, there were a lot of different, the whole range. We had, because, and this is another challenge that you face, is in some states it's pretty loosey-goosey what you need to be hired in the first place. There's no testing for your own literacy level or your own level of math. Now, other states have those kinds of tests. You need to pass a certain literacy level before you can walk in and teach in the LSERB program. But we do not have that in Oklahoma. So we had people who looked at us and said, I don't read. I don't really like to read. And I said, hold that feeling, because it's exactly how your students are going to feel sometimes. And so I said, that's okay, we'll work with you, But it was more of a challenge. Handed something, they'll be like, these look like college words. And we're talking about project-based learning. And so, it didn't look like college words to me, but I'm like, those are the college words I saw. But to them, it did, so it was kind of a big deal. So the standards-based assessments, project-based learning, cooperative learning, the literacy that we do with these folks is we're pretty much basing off the Common Core state standards. So we're teaching them 3 kinds of writing, which are the 3 kinds of writing in the Common Core state standards for English language arts: argumentative or persuasion, informative or, to explain, and narrative or to tell a story. And you can find authentic writing in CTE in all 3 of those areas. So I'm writing to persuade when I write a proposal or make a plea to my boss for funding or try to convince a client that I'm the one to do this job. We write to inform when we, write information about our business, when we write a business plan, when we, provide information to our colleagues on a recent new rule that's come out about safety or whatever. And we write stories when we write incident reports, when we write case studies in health and human services, when we document a case in health, and we're writing down, taking notes, we have to be able to tell a story from beginning to end in detail and not leave anything out. So those are 3 kinds of writing, and we work with those 3 kinds of writing. We also teach how to help students read a complex text. So we try to give them about 7 or 8 strategies, like 2-column notes, graphic organizers, things for vocabulary that they can use to get through those kind of things. That's numeracy. We're also working, SREB's got a great project with the Gateway, or the Gates Foundation, and we have a mathematics design collaborative. And so we're learning some really wonderful things about how to teach math in CTE. And we've brought those lessons to our materials. And we also teach the teachers 7 strategies for helping their students solve math problems. Chunking, KWC, you can ask me about that one at the break, all different kinds of things. And they really picked up on those and used them well. I was really impressed, even though we had a wide range of folks in there that had comfort with math. And of course, we talked a little bit about managing the classroom. How you deliver this makes a difference. So you use the workshop format, have content-specific examples. They have little patience with you when you show them something that's not theirs. Now, I do think as you go through the year, you have to broaden their perspective on that. And I think we need to broaden our perspective in all of CTE, because there is value in a health person looking at how a person in construction trades is doing this And we can have great conversation about that, and we should. But you really do need to develop in a deep set of content-specific examples so that students feel pretty good about that. The teach-backs are huge. We teach them, that's where they really learn reflective practice, because once they see their colleagues do something, then they provide feedback loops. We do a warm feedback loop where everybody says, this is something that's really good about what you did, and a cool feedback loop, which is things, suggestions, ideas for improving. And we word that as, have you thought about? Have you thought about, making eye contact when you're speaking? Have you thought about drawing a picture on the board when you're trying to explain that math concept? Have you thought about using, a cooperative learning group here? So we try to give some really good ideas to each other. And they have difficulty with that at first, but it gets better as the year goes on. It really builds the professional community of the group, which is neat. It's very important to coach, and this is where we really miss out. If we do the whole speaker thing and then we let them plan on their own, the coaching when you're walking around the room and watching them work, that's where the rubber meets the road. You're looking over their shoulder, you're seeing, oh my gosh, they really did not get that. So you may have to do some small group teaching right there to say, okay, come on over here, let's talk about this and, figure out, because you're not quite, So you are really working with those individual groups, and you're looking, or those individuals. And I say this because not one of the great feedback pieces that we got from the first, second year was that these teachers should not always work in small groups. Even when they're all working together in the same content, relative content area, they need to sometimes work individually. And they just need to get their head together and have that. So we moderated that. At first we had them in groups all the time, and it was really too much. And we recognized that eventually. We developed these cards that we used during the professional development, where they were like an index card. This was one of our data collection strategies. And at the end of every 45 minutes to an hour, the teachers gave us feedback on how well they were engaged. Was it relevant to them? Were they able to interact, reflect in a way that they could begin to understand what was going on? And so they had 5 questions they had to answer, and then we charted that. And if you don't think that made you nervous as an instructor, my goodness, it wasn't just grueling 2 weeks for them, it was a grueling 2 weeks for me. It was one of the most challenging experiences I've ever had as an instructor. Amazing. So here's some things that we've learned. The quality of the professional development needs to be just in time. It needs to be practical, and you need to sequence the specific skills to make absolute sense for what they need to do within the next 9 weeks time span. So they've got to walk in, if you've taught in the classroom, you know exactly what that is. You need your first day lesson plan, you need your course syllabus, you need, and so these things just simply must be done. So you're on them to do those in that 2-week time frame, and they do get stressed out. So, have some kind of resuscitator around. Dr. Bottoms hinted at this at the beginning, but there's this notion that we heard from the Gates Foundation. They introduced us to this topic. Well, 2 that I thought were some of the more transforming ideas I've heard this year. And one was this notion of productive struggle, that real learning, deep learning, is coming up against something that either you don't know or you're not comfortable with. And when you push through that, you really learn. And they are teaching us how to do that in the math and literacy design collaboratives, because that's also something you have to teach your students. Persistence is a major 21st century skill. And we have, instead, this was the second compelling idea, what we've been doing is GPSing our students. Now, when I first heard that, I thought, oh, that's great. I love my GPS. Are you kidding me? I absolutely love it. What would I do without it? And the thing is that the thing with the GPS is you don't have to think. So I can get in a rental car usually, I stick my GPS on the thing. I have no idea where I'm going, but that little GPS will tell me every next turn. If that thing doesn't work, I'm like, north, south, east, west, 25 miles, 40 miles, I have no clue. And what Gates Foundation was suggesting to us is we GPS our students too much. We are there, and the minute they feel productive struggle, their little hand goes up, or they're running up to your desk or whatever. What do I do next? What do I do next? and we do not teach them how to begin to ask their own questions. One of the things we taught the beginning teachers was the rule of 3. You have to have 3 people. When you come against a struggle with your students do, you teach them that they have to try 3 places before they try you. They can try their textbook, they can try another person in their group, they can try another person, they can try their elbow partner, they could try the technical manual. Think of those things. Where could you go to find something out before me? And that's because that's what they have to do in the real world. So productive struggle and GPSing, very thing. Teachers are prepared to contribute to school improvement efforts. One of the neat stories that we had was a teacher who had no college education, ran his own HVAC business, went back to his home CT center, got hired to teach the same thing, HVAC. He was one of our stars, and he's had a very interesting kind of a way about him of working. You know, every teacher has their kind of their style fundamentally. They all share similar skills, but kind of a style. And he was kind of just, we could tell he was going to be able to develop really good relationships with his students, and he did. But we had no clue that what we taught him in literacy in those 2 weeks, he went into his technical center, which was a new technology centers that work site, and he was bored at the training because he'd already learned all the skills in our program. And he said he was bored to me, but, you know, he has this kind of way of making a joke about it, right? He ended up on the literacy team. This year, he's the chair of the literacy team. It's his 2nd year of teaching. And it just, you know, he just had a way of sharing it with his fellow teachers that was very natural, and they ended up coming to watch him. He was one of the best at setting up. He immediately set up his class into teams and made them each their own HVAC company. They had poster on the wall to design their own invoices. Every day he does a little competition. I forget what he calls it. It was like 2 truths and a lie. They come in, they read a section of the HVAC textbook. It was just like this. You know, like, what? Are you kidding me? But they go through it every day because they come in and they read and they compete to find 2 truths and a lie on each section of the chapter, and then put them up. And then the different teams go around the room and figure out which one's the lie. It is so, and they keep points, they keep score, they totally, I mean, he's got it going on. And, you know, they're reading their technical journals and reporting on them, and he's just got everything. So they're prepared to participate in some of these larger school reform issues, which is really cool. The quality of support makes a difference. There's specialized training and materials for mentors and administrators, so everybody's speaking the same language. Sustained and structured support needs to be connected to the professional development. I've said that over and over. On-site mentors need to be available on a daily basis. We pretty much tell them that. You need to be touching base every day. Maybe not a full-blown meeting, but every day, particularly in the first month of school. Coordination is really needed among all stakeholders, and the program delivery needs to be intense. The 2 weeks is important. We got pushback from a lot of superintendents at first in some of these states where teachers weren't hired yet, and they weren't willing to hire them for the 2 weeks. So that was a problem at first. And then people started realizing, people like Eric, the HVAC teacher, were getting in there and having monumental impact in their first year, and they're kind of like, well, maybe it is worth it for the 2 weeks. And so I think we're changing some ideas there. It's not a fix-it program for teachers who aren't doing well. I mean, we had a couple that were thrown in there for that. It was like their 3rd year of teaching or their 2nd year of teaching, and they'd already had some poor performance issues, and it wasn't really designed for them. And another thing we found in this year is that we had some traditional teacher educators who received the training from us, and then were delivering the program. And instead of following the instructor guide, they went into professorial mode and just began to like tell stories and kind of do a little bit more lecturing than actually engaging them. And they started to get behind, and the other instructors said, no, you can't do that. We're going to get too far behind in our 2 weeks. They're not going to get enough time to work because it's pretty well laid out, you know. And so they regrouped, and the professor changed his style and kind of had an epiphany about that. So it was a very interesting finding that we end up with. Okay, and Dr. Bottoms can weigh in on some of these things too, because we just got a few more minutes. But as we look to put this model out there for other people to implement, we think there's going to be some conditions for implementation that will make a difference, because we did see differences in self-efficacy, competence, and commitment to the field. But to get those things, you need to make sure you have fidelity to the model. And we have a state that's kind of gone rogue on us, and they're kind of doing other things and picking and choosing. And so when we have our webinars, you can kind of tell they're not on the same page. They're like, well, our teachers don't really, all of a sudden they're saying, well, they don't really get why they need to put literacy in there. They say they're not reading teachers. I'm like, well, did you do the lesson on da-da-da-da-da? And they're like, oh, no, we haven't done that yet. So I'm like, well, you better go back and do that, because that's what it's designed for. So, and we had some pretty good success with it. So you need to kind of take our suggested sequence and things like that. I think that when you first use this, you're going to want some technical assistance on actually laying out how you're going to do this in your district, in your state, in your university. And then we can come in and train your trainers. So that should work pretty well. We have training designed, it's about 3 days, because they need to practice the teach back, how to do the teach backs. They need to practice, how to use the materials, and just be really familiar with the content and where we put things, because we went through a series of 3 years of field testing. You need to have the training and commitment of the local administrators and mentors. We have sample, agreements on that you can extend to them. There needs to be some kind of incentive, either they're paid time or they're getting credit, university credit. That would work. And there needs to be some commitment when you use our materials, because what we want to do is make this a living set of materials that we do revise every few years, that we keep current for the field, and we want to know if they're still working. So we want to be able at SREB to come out and evaluate, use some of our evaluation tools to see if you're implementing with integrity and to see if you're getting some of the same findings that we found. Okay. Do you want to add anything, Dr. Bottoms, on that one?
Those of you with the state, if you have some interest in this effort, we'll be pleased to meet with your key folks and kind of work it through and see how we could work out a 1-year kind of design where we would support you over that year, and then you could begin to take it and move it on your own. If you're with a large district, you have a cohort of at least 10 U teachers, this may be something you want to think about or join with someone else to do. We'll be glad to work with you. I think the number one key policy question here, and we did this back in the dark ages, back when I was young, we literally got the state legislature to let us put, I was from a state, it was all state pay, to literally pay these folks 2 weeks, put them on 2 weeks early, and 2 weeks that second summer. So I think you have to do that with a local board. You can either do the tuition around here, but I think that's the fundamental policy question you need to get a state or local board to agree to do. Now you think about it for a moment. How much more productive, how much more student learning will occur if teachers walk in with the first 9 weeks programmed out, and somebody's going to help them each 9 weeks to do that? We're not very big on planning in America. That's one of our big challenges. We do not give teachers enough time for planning. And you come back for that second summer and you plan around these 4 strands a whole year. I think that's a big investment. And one thing I sat here and listened to Heather this morning, one of the things I hope we can do is develop a participant survey so that we can track whether or not who is teaching it is doing it with fidelity.
Yeah, pretty much that. I think we've
pretty
got
close to that.
We could use that.
Yeah. So if you have some interest in that, though, to me, that's the key part here of making this work. And I think she's covered very well. It's not that this can't be improved, but you can't make it, this is not a typical college course. If you do it that way, now they're earning 12 hours credit, I believe.
In Oklahoma, that's semester hours. It's different ones in different states.
But for 25 years, we've had in legislation that we need to engage kids in the language of the field they're studying, be able to use the tools of mathematics, because math is the best predictor, achievement is the best predictor we have of an 18 years old's earnings at age 28 is their math skills. In all of our fields, math is a tool, and increasingly literacy is a tool. One of the reasons young men are having trouble is they did not acquire the literacy tools, did not acquire the technology tools that go along with the literacy tools. And this is a world, if you do not have those, you're not going to be on the bench. You're not going to be in the ball game. They're critical tools.